What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so getting back into our video topics on rebooting Marvel Comics, or at least how to reboot Marvel Comics. One thing I want to reiterate in the last, from the last video, in this video, was something that I don't think people seem to grasp, or at least some people didn't seem to grasp. This is not a publication order. If this was a publication order, we would bankrupt Marvel, and we would drive off any user base, because not everybody wants to read one comic book per month about the origin of the One Above All, or the origin of the universe, or something along those lines. If we published only one of these stories once every month, basically Marvel publishes 12 comics a month, we would destroy Marvel Comics. Disney would sell them off, or they would go in and be like, what are you guys doing? We would kill the audience base. I would lose interest. One comic book a month for Marvel Comics, I'd go crazy. So this is not a publication order. This is a reading order. So we're 3 years out. And if you want to read, this is the order that you would read it in. I mean, this is pretty much how you would do it. So again, like in the last video, we talked about the cosmic entities, the cosmic beings. And so this one, we're going to do two different parts to this. The first one's going to be the non-cosmic entities, which are optional. And the second one are basically maxi series, or really just graphic novels if you want to take that approach. And we'll talk about that once we get to them. But with regards to the non-cosmic entities, there's a handful that we can do. We can do the Elders of the Universe, we can do the Deviants, we can do the Eternals, the Kree, the Skrulls, the Shi'ar, the Nova Corps, and Asgard. These are one-shot comics, and they basically tell the origin of these things, the origin of the Elders of the Universe. For those of you guys who don't know, the Elders of the Universe are basically a handful of beings, maybe 5 or 6 people that exist in Marvel Comics, the Contemplator and the Grandmaster and the Runner and the Gardener and all the Collector. All these guys that kind of exist out there, and they're basically the last surviving members of their respective races. But in this instance, you literally split the story into 5 parts, or however many elders there are, and you explain their origins. Here's the origin of the Grandmaster, the origin of the Collector, the origin of the Runner, the origin of the Gardener, the origin of the Contemplator. You explain what their stories are, what their races were, and where they came from. They don't have to be super long. You can do that in 5 pages. It's pretty simple and pretty easy. I mean, for the most part, people know what they are. The Grandmaster likes to play games. The Collector likes to collect things. The Runner just runs really fast. He loves to race. The idea of the Gardener is that he just grows fantastic gardens. The Contemplator just thinks about things. That's kind of the role they play. And you literally bring that in and throw that in there. From there, you move to the Deviants, the Eternals, and really you can almost combine those into one singular story. In my mind, what I would do here, you'd pick up where you left off with the Celestials, for example, in the Celestial one-shot of the cosmic entities. And you would say somewhere along the line, the Celestials showed up on Earth, they modify the genes of early man, and thus we got Eternals and Deviants. All the stories that, in human history, dating all the way back to the very early days of man, that dealt with cave drawings of angels coming down and these religious texts and the idea that angels help mankind fight a war and so on and so forth. Those were the Eternals. They were designed to be idyllic in terms of how they appeared. They could fly, they had healing factors, they lived in the heavens, they lived on Mount Olympus. Stories of people who went to these mountains, to these rural areas to seek a higher enlightenment and came back sometimes with powers, sometimes without, but talked about mythical beings with incredible abilities. That's all rooted in the Eternals. And you roll all that, you ingrain that into human history in Marvel Comics. That's basically what you base all that stuff on. From there, you go to the Deviants. And the idea was that when the Celestials modified the genes of early man, that what they did is they created these beings, the Deviants who had half-lives. Basically, with every generation, the lifespan of Deviants became shorter and shorter. But it's basically this idea that all the old stories in human history of trolls and monsters, of people who went to the wrong places of the world, or they traveled underground, never to be seen or heard from again. Someone stumbles into a tunnel and they find human remains and they find these, monsters and, beasts and stuff like that. Those are the Deviants. You roll all that stuff in, but you give the origin of those things. Now, because of the fact that they are part and parcel to each other, meaning that the Eternals and the Deviants wage war against one another, different things like that, you can do it all in the same story. But the one-shot is designed to tell their history up until the modern era. But from there, you jump into the Skrull one-shot. And all the Skrull one-shot is designed to do is basically say, hey, so when the Celestials showed up on Earth, our planet wasn't the only planet they visited. They visited Skrullos at one point in time. But where the Deviants basically went underground on Earth, the Deviant Skrulls took over. They conquered and eradicated everybody else. And so the Skrulls, as they exist in Marvel Comics right now, are basically Deviant Skrulls. They can shapeshift, they're kind of war-torn. They reached a point where they were part of, an enlightened society, but that went away during the whole war with the Kree. And that's when you bring in the Kree. Kree. You jump to the Kree one-shot and you say, okay, so like at some point along the line on the planet Hala, there were two different races. There were the Kree and there were the Kotati. And the result was that the Skrulls in their Age of Enlightenment showed up on the planet Hala on the Kree homeworld and said, we want one of you guys to be inducted into our empire because we're not going to choose both. So we're going to give you a test. We're going to send you to the moon of Earth. We're going to give you enough resources to last a year, and we want you to build something. And whoever's design we like the most, that's the one we're going to pick. And after a year, the Skrulls came back and the Kree had built this massive citadel for themselves. And the Kotati built a lush jungle. And because the Kotati's peaceful nature was more in line with the Skrulls chose the Kotati. The Kree waged war against the delegation. They killed them all. They reverse engineered the Skrull technology, advanced their own technology, and the Kree and the Skrulls have been warring for however many millions of years ever since. That's the origin. You just throw that in there. You say this is exactly how the Kree came to be. From there, you jump to the Shi'ar. You do the exact same thing, the origin of the Shi'ar Empire. You establish the fact that the Shi'ar are not just a singular race as part of an empire, but the Shi'ar are actually multiple races who have banded together under an empire. You establish the Imperial Guard, the most elite fighting force in the entirety of the universe. You could throw in the origin of gladiators like a backup feature if you wanted to, or something along those lines. You move along. The next one shot is the Nova Corps, the origin of the Nova Corps, how they came into existence. How does the world mind play into that? What's the purpose of the Nova Corps? What's its charter? This is what the one shot covers, the origin of that group. The next one is the origin of Asgard. And that's it. Like you literally cover, like you make sense of it all. You have like the world tree Yggdrasil, you consolidate that for a comic book nature. You take all that history, you eliminate what doesn't need to be there, you keep what does need to be there, and you apply it to all of these books. It's the origin of all these different things. From there, you move into the Tales series. One of the best things that Marvel ever did was during the old Journey into Mystery Comics. And we've talked about this before. In the old Journey into Mystery Comics by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby wrote and drew a series called Tales of Asgard. And all this did was cover everything from the time Asgard was formed all the way up until the time that Thor was banished and when the Thor stories picked up. But it introduced things like Magog. It introduced things like Surtur. It introduced how Odin got his power. What's the Odin Force? How does it work? How did Odin become king? What's the deal with his brothers, Vili and V? You grab all those things and you roll this all into this particular Tales series. Now, what you can do here is a couple different things. You can do a mini series, which is around 6 issues. You can do a maxi series, which is usually 12, or you can do a graphic novel. I would say go for a graphic novel. And the reason why is because the Tales of Asgard stories by Jack Kirby were usually around 5 pages each. They weren't designed to be long. They were backup features. Now, what you would do here is you would say, okay, we're Marvel Comics. We're basically doing a reboot. We have more attention on us now than we've ever had before. And we're literally filled to the brim with like writers and artists. So let's just grab more. And you turn the Tales series into nothing more than like a proving ground for people who want to draw, for people who want to write in the comic book scene. And each of them get like a 5-page story and they tell the Tales of Asgard. And you follow that trend, the Tales of the Nova Corps, the Tales of Galactus. That's what this can be. It's a proving ground for writers and artists, and it serves two purposes. You know, the first is that it expands on this mythos that fans would most likely be interested in. There's no promises. It doesn't mean that it'll succeed, but it means that like there might be interest there. Because you're releasing it as a graphic novel, you don't have to worry about pre-orders. Here's a graphic novel. Here it is. It's one story. It doesn't stretch on for a year or a year and a half. It's a singular story. It's one book that fans can go and buy and read. And if they get, 2/4 of the way into it and lose interest, they lose interest. The money's already there. Marvel's already got it. And they already have whatever they've learned along the way. So the fans get educated and Marvel still makes money on the back end. So it still works for them. The whole idea is that at the same time, Marvel's expanding their writer and artist base. But again, that's what these 3 maxi or these 3 graphic novels are for. It's kind of helping to build the foundation of Marvel Comics, rallying all that stuff together. I think it works. Now again, these aren't the only stories that you're getting. I mean, at the same time that these are coming out, you're also getting like, the origin of Namor the Submariner. You're getting the origin of Captain America. You're getting the origin of the Human Torch, Jim Hammond, the origin of the Invaders, Blue Marvel, the Sentry, Doctor Doom. You know what? Let's talk about that. The way that I would do this is I would do exactly what DC did, except instead of publishing 0 issues a year after the New 52 started, I would publish them right off the bat. Namor the Submariner, number 0. Captain America, Steve Rogers, number 0. The Human Torch, Jim Hammond, number 0. These would just be their origin stories. It would just be the definitive origin of these characters. Now with characters like Blue Marvel and the Sentry, you would have to create a chronology with these characters' origins. You would have to establish like what's going on here, and that's why the comics should reference other things. We could leave out the Sentry if we wanted to. I would prefer to see Blue Marvel kept in. In Marvel Comics, Blue Marvel was a guy named Adam Brashear, and he was basically the first superhero on Earth. He was the first person to like show up and become a superhero, and he was asked to step down by the President of the United States because he was a black superhero in the midst of like the civil rights movement. And the idea was that he was being pulled both ways. He didn't want to be part of the civil rights movement, and he didn't want to be part of the government's actions to like put him on parade. For him, it was The Earth is what I'm saving. I'm saving the planet Earth. That's what I am. My allegiance is to the Earth, not to one particular group of people. That was the whole Kevin Graveau story behind Blue Marvel. But you can grab that and you can throw it in. The Century was Marvel's attempt at that in the early 2000s, and it worked for what it was. But it's just one of those things where Marvel kind of just throws a character in there that apparently we never really knew about before. But moving on this list, you give us the origin of Doctor Doom. You give us the origin of Reed Richards, the origin of Ben Grimm, the origin of Johnny Storm, and the origin of Susan Storm, and then the origin of the Fantastic Four. You give us the origin of Professor X, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, Beast, Angel, Colossus, Wolverine, Thunderbird, Storm, Nightcrawler, and then the origin of the X-Men. You could even do the origin of Rogue or Gambit, but like that's what you do. The origins of these characters go into the origin of their team book. Why did Charles Xavier form the X-Men? What was it that led to Charles Xavier realizing that there are mutants out there who were evil? That's what you bring in. You bring all that stuff in so that when a person sits down and they say, I want to read Marvel Comics in chronological order, where do I start? They don't have to come to my channel and be told, well, you have to read all these books and like, here's the best you can do in chronological order. Instead, you just say like, here's like 48 comics. Just start there and read forward. But the whole basis is they're designed to give people an entryway. They're designed to not alienate people, to not put comic book fans in a position where it's like, well, if you don't understand, that's your problem. No, it's designed to say like, hey, look, we know you dig comic book superheroes. So like, here's the easiest place in the world to start. It's a line-wide reboot. It's not the New 52, right? It's not like, well, you know, Batman's rebooted unless there's stories that you like, and then those are in continuity and they somehow happen in the span of 5 years. No. What you do here is you get rid of Marvel time. You get rid of the sliding time scale. That doesn't exist anymore. Peter Parker is a 15-year-old kid. He's bitten by a radioactive spider. In 15 years, Peter Parker's 30. 15 years after that, Peter Parker's 45. In, you know, however many years, Peter Parker retires and somebody else becomes Spider-Man. Like, you keep that trend going. Heroes have to age out. What you do is you give each generation their own superheroes. You make the characters relatable, you make them interesting, but you also set in stone this idea that at some point they will retire, somebody else will take their place, and you'll get a new superhero. Sure, people will complain, they'll be fine. That I think is a great idea. It's cool. It worked for John Constantine for 30 years, hell's bells. So I don't see any reason why you can't do it here. And that's the thing, like once these Zero issues are done, once these origin stories are done, if we do Doctor Strange, if we do Black Panther, once all those stories are done, then you jump into the first 6 issues. And the first 6 issues are more or less montage issues. You know, they're kind of like fast track issues. In this 6-issue story arc for Iron Man, the first, you know, issues 1 through 6, here's what happened that like got us to the modern day. If the modern day is, you know, like 5 years after he first becomes Iron Man, then that's what we do. Or you can say all these origins are in the modern day. 2018, Peter Parker's a 15-year-old kid. He's bitten by a radioactive spider. Awesome. Issues 1 through 6, his first story arc, the first villain he ever fights. You use those first 6 issues to lay the groundwork for who these heroes are, for what these heroes are about. The first 6 issues is a story written by Marvel Comics that says nothing more to the reader. Here's why you should be reading Spider-Man. Here's why you should be reading Captain America. Here's why you should be reading Iron Man or whoever else. Like, this is why you need to read our stuff. Comics should be saying that by definition, but the first issue, the first story arc is the only story arc. It's the only chance you get to flesh out and establish a character in the eyes of fans. If fans don't like them, it's going to take a huge reworking in order to get fans to care about it. They wrote the X-Men for however many years, and it took Chris Claremont 17 years to get the X-Men elevated to like the #1 team in all of comic books. So like, that's literally what you do. You go through here, you make these stories one part love letter to existing fans and the legacy these heroes created, and at the second part, a welcome in to all the people who want to get into comic books. You're not saying it's a fresh start, but like it's a fresh start only insofar that it says #1, but you still got to read 15 years if you want to know what's going on. Like, that's not what you do. This is definitively a fresh start. This is, in every ounce of the word, a definitive reboot, but you don't make the same mistake DC did. You don't wipe away all that past continuity and ignore every single ounce of legacy. Don't get rid of the characters and teams that people loved. That's one of the big mistakes DC made, is they got rid of the classic Wally West and fans freaked out. You keep the classic characters, but you update them for modern day. Because I gotta tell you guys, like Peter Parker, sure, he's got a timeless origin. Uncle Ben dying, teaching him with great power comes great responsibility. That's timeless. That statement will ring true from now until the time humanity crashes down around us and the world explodes. Like, that will always be a definitive, absolute statement and a matter of fact. And so if that's the case, you can update that. Tony Stark becoming Iron Man, you could do that in any time frame. The characters are designed to be timeless. Captain America's rooted in the 1940s, but you wake him up now, you know, and the stories reflect that. You know, that's the beauty of Captain America, a man out of time. Captain America, if given the opportunity, would happily go back to 1941 if it's like he would remember it. In truth, he's a superhero now, so he operates as a superhero. But that's the cool thing about it, is you grab those themes and you roll them in. You give people a reason to care care about the characters, you give new people a reason to jump in and not feel like they're being left out. And at the same time, like, you literally open the floodgates for everything. So again, that's just kind of my stance on this, you know, just kind of my view on this whole thing. But let me know what you guys think, because I'm really kind of curious. I mean, you guys are the target audience, like all the new people who were here, the people who just stumbled across this video, the people who have never read comics before or who are lost and confused. Those of us who have been reading comics for years and we have no real confusion on where to start, this video is not really for us because we already know where to go. But for the people who are new, for the mom whose kid really loved Black Panther, she has no idea where to start, I'm asking you this question. Does this work for you? Like, is this interesting to you? Is this appealing to you? Give me your ideas and give me your thoughts. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.